Avant de débuter, je tiens à souligner que tous les Canadiens sont sur des terres sacrées qui peuvent être l'objet de nombreux traités et que ce terrain était et est le territoire traditionnel de divers peuples autochtones, y compris les Premières Nations, les Métis, les Inuits, toutes les régions de l'île de la Tortue. Je tiens à souligner que vous aussi, nos participants, êtes également recueillis sur de nombreuses terres sacrées et territoires traditionnels. Et je vous parle aujourd'hui de la région de la capitale nationale, territoire traditionnel algonquin, Anishinabeg non cédé. C'est donc avec humilité que nous tenons à respecter les liens continus avec le passé, le présent, le futur, ainsi que nos relations avec les peuples autochtones et non autochtones. Je suis heureuse et honorée d'avoir l'occasion de vivre, de travailler et de jouer dans ce territoire. As our team name indicates, HR innovation implies that we work on files that aim to incubate and advance human resources innovation here at ESDC, but also across the federal public service. And important that is the sharing of ideas and insights that may help or even challenge our current thinking and status quo. Our special guests today from TBS, Francis Lalonde, Laurent Rosel-Requel et Valérie Tran, Madame Tracy Peaver, agente libre, et Dr. Sarah Philby, auteur et multiples autres choses. As this is a participatory session, we invite you to choose the chat, raise your hand, use Slido if you have any questions throughout the session. The end will be dedicated to your questions, so we hope you came in prepared. The access code for Slido will be shared with you in the chat. When you enter the code, you'll be prompted to insert your email address. However, your questions will remain anonymous. Few housekeeping notes before we begin. Please advise that this session is being recorded and be shared afterwards on our GC Wiki page, GC Collab pages, YouTube, and that is so that our colleagues who couldn't attend live today can refer to this material. All participants will be muted during the presentation portions. Please keep your cameras off during the presentation except when speaking, and we invite you to turn the closed caption function for the duration of the presentation to enhance accessibility of the presentations. Et maintenant, en grande primeur, nos amis du SCT. Je vous laisse la parole.
Parfait, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for having us today. On est très, très heureux d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Alors, premièrement, je me présente. Mon nom, c'est Francis Lalonde. J'arrive tout juste dans un nouveau poste en tant que gestionnaire culture de leadership au bureau de la dirigeante principale des ressources humaines. I'm here with Laurent Rosen today. Valérie, unfortunately, could not make it. She's got, we're in full engagement mode, as we're calling it at the moment. And so we've got a few engagement sessions running at the same time. Laurent is the project lead for the Leadership Profile initiative. Some excellent work has been done by the team for which I can really take no credit. I am new, and so I'm very excited for Laurent to share the progress with you today. But before we jump into the Leadership Profile itself, I just wanted to situate the initiative within the broader HR context. The people and culture sector at OCRO is currently developing what we're calling a senior leaders strategy. And so you're going to see the placemat for this strategy up on the screen.
Can you see it?
I do see it, so I hope
Okay.
I'm hoping the participants are as well. Perfect, some thumbs up, I like that. So the strategy really aims to put people first, to attract, equip, and empower the senior leaders of today and in the future, to lead the public service in providing advice, developing policy, and delivering policy programs for all Canadians. Of course, this is in the increasingly complex global environment that we're currently seeing. There are a few very important levers of change to achieve the necessary culture change across the public service in order to truly put people first. And the first of which is really a modern leadership profile for all of our leaders. And although this initiative is part of the broader senior leaders strategy, we definitely envision this leadership profile making its way down and out across all levels of the organization. Alors, c'est ça pour l'introduction. Laurent, je te cède la parole pour nous parler plus de l'initiative et nous présenter le modèle.
Merci Francis. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm very excited to present you this new profile, which is, I have to say, not final. This is a profile that we're using for consultation. So we expect some changes after the consultation, depending on the comments we have during the presentation we hold. So we hope that we'll have a lot of comments today. I'm just going to speak very quickly about the context because Francis talked a little bit about it. As you know, we have actual key leadership competencies that were developed and adopted in 2015. What we notice is that since 2015, a lot of things have changed. You know this perfectly well. The present profile was more focused on a what approach based on result rather than on an approach based on people. And we understand that today, with the focus on inclusiveness, with the focus on mental health and all the complexity that we are facing every day in our work, we need a new profile for the leaders to be able for them to succeed in this new work environment. So because the current leadership profile and culture are not meeting present and future needs of the public service, we are trying to propose a new profile. Just one thing about the key leadership competency, it's not that they don't exist anymore or that they don't resonate anymore. They still do resonate. We did some consultation and people still look at them use them in their day-to-day job. But at the same time, we know that it's not enough for the leader to succeed in this environment. This is why we have chosen to amplify the how alongside the what. I'm going to explain myself. As I said, the 2015 key leadership competencies were quite focused on the result and not really on the people. And even if competencies are about the how, those that we have in 2015, they're still a lot about the what. So we are going to emphasize the how with revised competencies. The competencies explain how the leaders behave. We are also going to talk about mindset because the mindset is how leaders think and the way they think will influence the way they behave. And of course, a very important new component are the character attributes. I know that a lot of you are already familiar with this. Character attributes that explain who a leader is and which has also an influence, of course, of how they behave. So those are the three components that you will see in the new profile that we are proposing. Again, this is a profile for discussion, nothing in final in it. We just want your comments. Donc, je vais aller à la prochaine diapo. Au départ, il n'y a rien, c'est normal parce que je veux garder le suspense. Et donc, comme je le disais, le nouveau profil est bâti sur des mentalités, sur des compétences et sur des attributs de caractère. Alors, si je regarde les mentalités, pour commencer, les mindset in English, we have lead together. Lead together because in our actual world, it's very important to work together with other people. Nobody knows everything on anything. And because of this, we always need somebody else to achieve better results. Lead together also because we have new generation coming at work, and those new generation are eager to participate. And if we want to retain talents and to attract them, we need to lead with them. The next mindset is the newest one, I would say, is lead with care. Maybe the newest one, but so important in our actual world. Lead with care because we have a huge concern of mental health in the public service. We have also a focus, a very necessary focus on inclusion and on diversity. The next mindset is about lead with courage. Of course, every leader needs courage to lead. On a besoin de courage pour prendre des décisions parfois non populaires ou des décisions difficiles. Tous les leaders ont besoin dans leur action d'avoir du courage. Et le dernier, lead digitally. Gérer dans un monde, mener dans un monde numérique, c'est le nouveau contexte, c'est le contexte actuel. Ce n'est pas tant au sujet des compétences technologiques, mais plus des compétences dont on a besoin pour s'adapter à ce monde numérique. Vous verrez que ça parle d'agilité, entre autres choses. Si je vais à la prochaine et les prochains éléments, je vais commencer à vous parler des compétences. Donc, for Lead Together, il y a learn and coach continuously through changes. Learn because we need to learn new things every day. Coach because this is the responsibility of the leader to teach to their employee, to guide them in their development and to share what they have learned. And coaching also because we're not talking about real coaches, of course, we are talking about some coaching practice that the manager can develop in their management, in their day-to-day management. And coaching, yes, also because we'd rather help the person find the solution by themselves rather than give them the solution immediately. So learn and coach continuously through changes. And the second one is about collaboration, of course. Collaboration, yes, but collaboration with others and fostering collaboration at all levels, which is very important, inside and outside the organization. We have 3 character attributes with this mindset and competency: humility, judgment, and drive. I'm going to the next mindset, which is lead with courage. So you can find here competencies that you're used to. Achieve result was one of the former 2015 competency, but there is a big shift here. It's achieve result with and for.
Laurent, tu t'es mis sur sourdine sans faire par exprès, je pense. Ou peut-être t'as fait par exprès. C'est comme le coup que t'as fait avec la diapo, là, qui n'a rien dedans. Peut-être que là... Attends, moi, je vais essayer d'activer ton micro. Non, je ne suis pas capable.
Est-ce que j'étais sur sourdine depuis le début?
Ouais? Non, c'est une blague. Je t'ai mis une seconde d'écart.
Une seconde d'écart? Ok,
Ouais.
donc je reprends Lead with Courage. Tu m'as fait peur, c'était une bonne blague. Donc, achieve results with and for people, because when we achieve results, we need to do it with the people in our team, with our colleagues, and we have to make sure also that when we achieve results, we don't leave anybody on the road behind us. And also for the people of Canada, of course, this is why we are here, and this is why we are achieving results. The other competencies is also quite familiar, I would say. It's about a vision and a strategy. Yes, you have to develop a vision, but at the same time, you have to engage around this vision and you have to act on it. We have 3 character attributes. The first one is accountability. The second one is courage. And the third one is empathy. Why empathy here? Yes, because my first reflex was to put it with lead with care. And I know if some person have already attended this presentation, because I've done it a few times, I still repeat the same thing, but this is truth. This is the truth. Before leaving on vacation, so I put empathy on lead with care because it was kind of obvious. And when I came back, somebody switched it to lead with courage. And in fact, it makes completely sense because it's kind of puts the emphasis on achieving result with and for people. Yes, you achieve result, but you have to take care of your people. You have to care about them, and you have to take them into consideration. The next mindset, Lead with care, 2 competencies, of course, inclusion and respect for diversity, which include, of course, anti-racism and reconciliation, which are very important in our today public service. And foster self-awareness and well-being. Well-being, very important. Self-awareness, every leader should know himself and should encourage others to develop this knowledge on themselves. Because as a leader, to achieve results and to be a good leader, you need to know about who you are and how you act based on what. 3 character attributes: authenticity, temperance, which is about, I would say, stable mind, not getting angry, not just keeping some calm when for whatever happens, especially when you have crisis. Humanity, which is, of course, very important. The next one, digitally, as I said, it's about agility. And it's about demonstrate and foster innovation, which was part of the former competencies, but which is still, of course, very important. 3 character attributes: adaptability, curiosity, and transcendence. Transcendence, I would say, is about the future. It's about being able to envision the future with optimism. It's about also doing the extra mile when you're doing your work, going beyond expectation. Though this is a very important element. But of course, we know that maybe the vocabulary is not the right one to use because it's not, I would say, plain language. All those mindset, competencies, and attributes are around the vision of the leader, senior leader strategy, people first senior leader delivering value for Canada. And this is where we're going to go to the discussion. I have 3 questions for you. And I'm going to stop talking, which is good. Est-ce que les mentalités, les compétences et les attributs de caractère proposés répondent aux besoins actuels et futurs de la fonction publique? Le profil est-il suffisamment audacieux pour orienter la culture de leadership vers l'approche axée sur les personnes? Et est-ce que les nouvelles attentes répondront aux besoins du leadership inclusif? La parole est à vous. Je suis prêt à entendre vos commentaires, vos questions, et ça me fera plaisir de les prendre en note et de répondre aux questions, évidemment.
Super intéressant, merci beaucoup. La question que je me pose depuis le tout début, c'est mais comment on va faire pour mesurer tout ça? Comment est-ce que...
C'est une excellente question. Alors, comment on va faire? Je vais répondre brièvement. Je pourrais dire rapidement, on ne sait pas encore. Ce n'est pas tout à fait vrai, je vous rassure. Les mindsets ne seront pas évalués. Dans notre vision, ce n'est pas des choses qu'on peut évaluer. C'est la façon dont un leader pense, c'est quelque chose qu'on peut inciter, mais ce n'est pas quelque chose qu'on peut évaluer, donc on ne l'évaluera pas. Les compétences, on a déjà l'habitude de les évaluer. On travaille avec la Commission de la fonction publique pour développer des outils pour les nouvelles compétences, quand elles seront finales. Les attributs de caractère, je dirais qu'il y a plusieurs façons de voir les choses. Ça peut être inclus dans les compétences, parce que si vous regardez nos compétences actuelles dans les comportements, on a déjà des attributs de caractère, même si on n'en parlait pas. Ou ça peut être évalué globalement avec un outil développé tel que celui qu'utilise Ivy Business School. Encore une fois, j'aimerais dire qu'on ne va pas adopter le modèle Ivy Business School, mais on sait que ce modèle sur le caractère-based leadership est aussi utilisé par beaucoup de ministères. Donc, on veut qu'il y ait quand même peut-être un certain alignement, parce qu'on ne veut pas que les ministères aient à refaire ce qu'ils ont déjà fait, bien sûr. Mais on ne va pas vers adopter l'approche CBL. En tout cas, la décision finale n'est pas prise, mais je tenais à insister là-dessus. Donc, évaluation, encore à définir, mais on travaille dessus.
Excellent, bon à savoir et noter. On va rapidement passer à nos prochaines invités et on va laisser les réponses à nos questions pour la fin. Alors, Madame Pever, if you please.
Thank you so much for this invitation. It's wonderful to see you all here today in this community, my friends, colleagues, former clients. Aujourd'hui, je vous présente en anglais, mais je vous encourage à poser des questions dans n'importe quelle langue dans le Slido. And I should say this is the first time since I emerged from a very all-consuming 18-month mandate that I've actually sat down to summarize my experience. So I'm going to do my best to quickly give you the context of the client system I was working with, the nature of my service offering as a Canada Free agent, and my top 3 observations about my client's leadership that I hope we will see more of, especially as we get more serious about transforming bureaucracy and structures of inequality, and to align ourselves with this vision that we just heard from our colleagues at TBS today. But I really want to offer you hope and to herald the good news that the kind of leadership with the potential to bring more equity and inclusion to the public service is alive and growing over in the Western region of Public Services and Procurement Canada. And that access to the potential for meaningful, desirable change is not in the hands of few, but in the hands of many. So when Cheryl Baranecki became the Regional Director General of PSPC in late 2019, her new boss at the time, Associate Deputy Minister Michael Vandergrift, asked her, if you could achieve one thing in your time here as RDGE of the Western region, what would it be? And her reply was culture. I invite you to use the chat to capture your thoughts about what that means. What does workplace culture actually mean? In both large and small forums, Cheryl consistently referred to workplace culture as the region's chapeau priority. And I thought about it as like the crown sitting atop all the other deliverables. And she would say, if we can get our culture right, we can do anything. And this really tracks with the reams of research that show a direct correlation between workplace culture and performance. In 2015, in the Journal of Organizational Behavior, Boyce and Gillespie found that a positive culture boosts performance, but performance alone does not create a positive culture. So in short, culture comes first, and it's our culture that enables the performance that we want to see. It's not like the region didn't have anything else to do. The region was handling procurement in the time of COVID, obtaining PPE and vaccines, responding to housing and water crises in Nunavut, and addressing the confirmation of mass graves found at residential schools in the provinces where the majority of the region's 550 staff were located. But the work that made her eyes light up was the work that we were doing to steward the kind of culture that helps bring out the best in people. In both words and actions, Cheryl put people first. And today I'll share just a short snapshot of what I witnessed in my time, doing my darndest to support her uncommon vision. And to be fair, Cheryl was supported by a whole football stadium of smart, caring humans at all levels, some of whom are with us today. But for time limitations, I'm tying all this work back to her vision and her priorities. So, hi everybody, I'm Tracy Peaver. I'm an organizational development practitioner. I'm a Canada Free agent, so I work on short mandates across government departments. I'm a social scientist, and I use research, learning, and dialogue to help humans and teams and organizations to develop. But what does it mean to develop? I help my clients to articulate what that means for themselves in their contexts. And I was engaged to help the region at all levels to make sense of what culture means for them and what their ideal culture would look like in visible behaviors and attitudes. I joined the region as a free agent and a third party in October 2020. I didn't have a team to manage. I didn't have positional power, but I was in a stance of side-by-side partnership. Cheryl and her executive team had their own ideas of what needed to change about the existing culture and why, but culture is cultivated and owned and lived in by everyone. So it was important that the voices of everyone be heard before charting out priorities and directions and discrete project plans. So most of my work in stewarding the discovery of culture involved facilitating dialogue and research processes designed to help the region to articulate what would make the biggest and best difference to improving their culture and their ability to deliver on priorities. What would help them to solve problems together, to adapt to continuously changing conditions and new information? What would help them grow in their careers, to develop trusting relationships with colleagues, to experiment with new ways of working, to make good use of failure? And what would help them to take care of themselves and to stay healthy in this process? So I used an approach called participatory action research to facilitate this inquiry into culture with multiple populations. I worked with the executive tier of 16 people, the manager, supervisor, and team lead cohort of 106 people, with 6 vertical branch teams from the regional director of that branch all the way down to operational levels, with equity-seeking populations, and in weekly dialogues that were open to the whole region called Friday Feels. So this approach is a group learning process at its essence, but it positions the client population not just as the research population generating insights, but also as the researchers into their own condition, into their own ambitions, and with the opportunity to propose actions and initiatives that would help them move in the direction of where they say they want to go. So this approach positions me, the researcher, as a partner, and it's designed to keep the decisions as well as the implementation of feasible change in the hands of those who will live it out every day. This approach, it also equalizes the voice of upper tiers of the organization with other tiers, not as louder or more influential, but equal. So for a leadership team to disrupt traditional top-down approaches to change and use this kind of participatory approach was pretty radical. But then to give equal access to all branches, all layers of the organization, it takes an enormous amount of good faith and trust, not just in their people, but also in the practitioner facilitating the process. No pressure. So here's what I'd like to highlight about the leadership behaviors that fueled this kind of approach. The first I already mentioned. Cheryl placed such high value on organizational culture and the human experience at work that she called it a chapeau. And I saw this priority come primarily from wanting to help reduce the stress and repeating difficulties of her people, with improving performance more as like a byproduct rather than the other way around that we usually see. Second, I also already mentioned she placed such high value on shared ownership of organizational culture and this kind of nothing about us without us ethos. As a leader, Cheryl wanted all levels of the organization to feel like they could use their voice in the process of shaping the region's culture. And she was using her power at the top of the organization to distribute, not to concentrate it in the minds and hands of a few or experts, but to give equal access in participating in decisions about what needed to change in both vertical and horizontal contexts. The third, I want to highlight how much Cheryl connected the culture of work and the power for meaningful change with how we listen and how we speak to each other every day. She heeded the findings of many who have said, if you want to transform a culture, one of the best levers is to change everyday conversations. And there were many examples of her investing in intentional, focused dialogue, designing how they were running regular meetings to hear from everyone at the table, and reflecting on their daily work together. So Cheryl initiated what was called the RDG listening journey. So in the spring of 2021, she invited the entire middle management tier of 106. She held 9 one-hour conversations with her, and she asked the same 5 questions in all 9 sessions. And I would say she spent about 80% of her time in those conversations listening to what they had to say. I won't go into the qualitative data analysis and what we did with those results following those conversations, not here, but I will say that the experience was eye-opening. It was courageous and it was trust building for everyone involved. Managers and executives marveled at her time investment to hear directly from the deeper layers of the organization. Many managers had said they had never received an invitation to access the direct ear of leadership in such a small forum. And her executives marveled at the courage that managers stepped into to speak hard truths to power. And Cheryl herself, she was further fueled in her commitment to steward a safe, people-first work environment and to uproot the defaults of command and control cultural habits that were causing so much extra work, stress, bottlenecks, time delays, and conflict. She shared back the full results of her findings with the managers themselves, and she invited them to help shape the next steps and to prioritize what needed to be put into action. At the executive level, Cheryl and her leadership team attended monthly 90-minute leadership development and action learning sessions that I designed and facilitated in response to what they said their priorities were. Things like to break down silos, to increase interdependencies between their branches, to reduce permission-seeking defaults, and to trust their managers to make good decisions. And being together in regular conversation like this was practically non-existent and highly transactional before her leadership. But over time, the executive team became much more reflective, courageous, humble, vulnerable, more trusting of each other. And they were matching their intentions with their behaviors and holding each other accountable to fulfill what they said that they wanted. So they started to shift their focus away from the minutiae that they could trust other layers of the organization to handle toward a more strategic and enterprise level orientation, caring for the whole region together rather than over-focusing on individual silos. She offered me the trust to design and host weekly dialogue sessions guided by themes related to workplace culture, and they were open to the whole region. And these conversations brought remote silos and regionally distributed people closer together. They emphasized commonalities between their experiences and provided a safe space for the practice of civil discourse and listening while learning about organizational culture. There's a lot more to say about what happened in those 18 months, and I'll leave it there for now. But I hope this gives my colleagues at TBS, who we heard from earlier, some insight into leaders who are already leading together, leading with care and courage, collaborating at all levels. My name is Tracy Peaver. You can find me on Medium or on LinkedIn through the Free Agent Program if you want to hear more. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Peaver. Indeed, it's a really interesting example of how the model that has been developed and is being promoted by TBS can actually be applied. And there's lots of questions about that. So looking forward to the question period at the end. Dr. Sarah Philby, if you are ready. Thank you, Tracy. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, I've turned on my picture, but I don't know if you can see it. Can you?
Unless it's the beautiful picture of yourself, ma'am. No, we cannot.
Yeah, anyways, well, I've switched camera on and switched mic on, so at least you can hear me. So I'm going to start off my presentation in a slightly different way. I'm going to take you back to a story about United Airlines that happened some time ago. And a number of years ago, and there was a flight that was boarding at Chicago O'Hare Airport and going to Kentucky. It was oversold, as they're wont to do on airlines, and they called for volunteers, were not successful in getting any, and so they identified 3 people that had to leave the flight. 2 of them were a couple and they agreed to go. And the third said, no, I'm a doctor. I've got to get to a very important consultation tomorrow in Kentucky. and refused to go. Well, this didn't work out so well. They ended up dragging him kicking and screaming off. Well, actually not kicking and screaming because they hit his head on the headrest, and I think he was unconscious for most of the drag out of the door. And at the same time, people were taking videos, and it, of course, went viral. So following that, there was obviously, as appropriately, an incredible uproar. And everybody started looking for who was to blame, who was at fault in this. And there was two companies involved. There was the United Airlines, and then there was their security company. My reaction was a little different. My reaction was, oh my goodness, what on earth is it about the culture of those two organizations that leads its people to believe that that's a successful way to interact with customers? How did they become that way? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that from a perspective of managing in complexity, because that's what my doctorate is in. And, you know, we know of all the expectations of us as leaders. You know, we're to, and some of them are reflected here, achieve results, enable and empower, set visions and strategies. I would add, be objective, rational, be evidence-based, plan, implement, report on results, be in control, know what's going on, create and change cultures. So my take on it is slightly different, but I'm going to take you through a little bit of a discussion first about what is complexity. Probably the best way that I can explain it to folks is it's the difference between a really, really difficult Sudoku. I should have said at the beginning, je vais faire ma présentation en anglais, mais dans les questions, soyez à l'aise avec la langue de votre choix. Back to complexity definition. So a Sudoku can have 3 numbers in it, incredibly difficult to solve, but when you've solved it, and you can do it again. And there's a recipe, or there's a way of doing it. And it's a little bit different for bringing up babies. So you can have 5 different babies brought up in the same house, same church, same school, same hospital born in, et cetera, and all of them will turn out to be very, very different. And if you were to do it again, you'd probably get another 5 different babies. Complexity is what we work in. All of our work, because it involves human beings, is complex. And part of complexity is what you will perhaps have heard of as the flap of the butterfly wings. It's called nonlinear relations, or something very small can lead to very, very large results. And so what happens is because of that, and because of the nature of complexity, you cannot predict, you cannot control, you cannot determine. There is no recipe for how you make things turn out the way you want them to. So, you know, one of the challenges is that we tend to think about leadership as an individualistic type of behavior. And we reward people individualistically, and yet we are very much part of a whole complex environment. The whole issue with being unable to predict seized Ralph Stacey, who's the guy that was the sort of lead scholar developing the field of research that I did my doctorate in, and he couldn't figure out. He was a gifted, very bright guy, econometrician, had all these wonderful little models, and couldn't predict. And in fact, at one point, he was hired to advise day traders on what they should do and what was going to happen so that they could make lots of money for the company. Well, as you can imagine, that didn't go over so well because he became incredibly disillusioned at his ability to predict. He ended up back in academia, and over time he developed a perspective on complexity, on managing in complexity. I'm going to take you through very quickly, and then take you through a couple of the sort of the high level implications of that. First of all, this particular doctrine was actually inspired by complexity science. And if the work that's been done on complexity suggests that what's going on is just as a result of all of the interactions between the various components in the environment. So it's in our case, it's the result of everything that we are all doing. And out of all of those interactions, patterns emerge that affect us, that we react to, and that as we react back into the patterns, we in turn change the patterns. The kind of patterns I'm talking about, things like our stories, what's true, what's not true, our habits, our traditions, our ideologies, our biases, who we trust, who we don't trust. All of those affect how we interact with each other. And then when we interact, again, we cause small changes in those patterns at the same time. So this is an ever evolving what's going on. Second thing is he heavily relied upon pragmatic philosophy. And in particular, there is no such thing as the rational objective observer, particularly in complexity. The American philosopher Thomas Nagel said, there is no view from nowhere. And, you know, we are in it up to our necks. We are part of the patterns. We are affected by them and we are affecting them. The thought of standing to one side, outside of what's going on and observing is an impossibility because we're actually in there as part of the pattern that's going on. The other thing that I would add is that the neuroscience has shown that emotion is physiologically intertwined and inseparable from cognition. So the idea of being rational all the time, well, our cognition is also, as I say, interrelated with our emotion, and one cannot separate the two. So, and thus what we perceive is going on is determined by our history, our culture, our situation, as well as by when we're actually making it and what's going on in our lives. Third thing is the other main element of creation of this particular perspective is group dynamics and group sociology. When you're looking at this goes back to the individualistic points I was making. The individual and society cannot be separated. They're inseparable. We are all interdependent in one way or another, and we are social through and through. We don't exist without society, and society doesn't exist without individuals. So again, the problem with thinking through some of the ways that we think through about leadership and so on, it's not about any one individual making things happen. It's not just them that are affecting patterns. Others are affecting patterns at the same time. They may have more influence and thus more ability to make change, but again, it's not just them. So this suggests that some implications for the role of leaders and perhaps competencies. The first one is that so much of our work to figure things out together, to make decisions, to problem solve, and so on, it's actually quite often anxiety provoking because it's often arisen because something has gone wrong. We've had a breakdown of our expectations. We've been surprised. And so that by itself creates anxiety. Meaning making also involves conflict because you have no innovation or creativity without difference in perspective. And so conflict is inherent to our work to make meaning together. What all this means from a perspective of a leader in a complex environment is that you, as a leader, the need to manage your own anxiety so that you don't take the first piece of certainty you can get, jump on it and figure your problem solved, but also so that you make it psychologically safe for those members of your team to explore what I call productive doubt together. So you to explore different perspectives. So the second thing is that another competency or important part of being a leader is what I would call group-mindedness. It's a concern with how we relate to and impact each other, being aware of it. In doing it, my research was actually on trust and its role in meaning making. Trust and mutual respect is particularly important as we work together. Trust is reciprocal. So if I trust you, you're more likely to trust me. And if I don't trust you, you would be very unwise to trust me. And as we go through the anxiety of meaning making and the potentially conflictual meaning making, how do we find ways that we can stay in relation with each other so that we can work it out? The next one is being prepared, is what we call reflexivity, being prepared to ask what's going on for me and what's going on for others, acknowledging that the perspective is dependent upon who the person is and their situation, and that in turn may generate assumptions and blind spots. And that means that in our work together to figure things out, we need to try and take into account as many values and as many perspectives as possible as we do so. Two more. In complexity, you don't, and this is not meant to be incredibly relativist, but we are not after perfect. We are after what's good enough. What's the best that we can do today? There's a number of people, Winston Churchill, Eisenhower, both said something along to the effect, plans are useless, but planning is essential. We need to, in planning, the importance of discussion, of exploration, developing a better understanding. You're not going to get an answer because, again, you can't predict or determine. Developing relationships, which are important in terms of how we work together. And then when we have made decisions and made plans, to hold them lightly, because again, as the world changes, as it does, that we have openings to reevaluate, that we have perhaps allowed for the provision of different options or optionality, so that we haven't closed too many doors in our decision making. And lastly, in this area, being respectful of practical knowledge, which is the the experts of many years who have an understanding of a particular field. And I say it's the ones that have seen the movie before. One last one, Jasmine, and then I will finish. And I guess this is actually just to finish up. The expression that I use is that the way that we work together today is the way that we will work together. If we treat each other with respect today, we're more likely to be able to engage effectively together tomorrow. We need to always think, what are we trying to do? What are we doing now? What's going on? What are we trying to achieve? And most importantly, who are we becoming? That's it. Thanks.
And that was beautiful. And I recognize so much of what you said in a lot of my therapy sessions. So thank you. The models that we developed in the past, we need to re-examine them because they may not serve our current selves, which is absolutely true. What you said about complexity. Listen, I think you are going to be a recurring guest. I hear you're writing a book. So maybe once that's published, please come back and talk to us about this and why we should listen to Dr. Philby. Well, she's got hands-on experience as former ADM. So enjoy retirement, but stick around for some questions, please. Alors, nos amis du SCT. Madame Peever, je vais vous redemander de réallumer vos caméras. We have a few questions from Slido. Of course, lots of questions for Okro because, you know, whenever you step up and you show up, we're like, how is this going to affect me? How are we going to measure? So some questions around the change management. And I think that part of the conversations you're having across the different communities is specifically for this purpose. You're trying to maybe make sure that people are familiar with the new norms. If they have something to say, then they're able to communicate that with you. So what is the strategy, folks? Do you have one? Do you want to share now? What is the strategy around change management specifically for these new norms?
Francis, tu veux que...
Je peux commencer. Tu peux peut-être rentrer. Premièrement, la première chose que j'aimerais mentionner, this is a draft model. We are very early in the process, and so the current, the first strategy, and I think it is a a part of the change management strategy as well, and in terms of getting buy-in and so on, is to consult early, and that's what we are trying to do here. And so the model that Laurent presented is the first one we've put together. We've received, we've been on a roadshow of sorts, and so we've done quite a few consultations. We've received some great feedback, and our intention is to take that, wrap that up into the next iteration of this model. En termes de stratégie de mise en œuvre, je pense qu'une des stratégies qu'on pense présentement utiliser, c'est une stratégie plutôt pilote, une stratégie où est-ce qu'on va prendre du temps à travailler avec des organisations pour s'assurer que le modèle est le bon, et puis à travailler avec eux pour déterminer aussi quel genre d'outils, quel genre de matériel qu'on pourrait créer pour eux, puis comment qu'on pourrait un peu tenir la main des ministères dans la mise en œuvre de tout cela. La stratégie de mise en œuvre, c'en est une qu'on développe présentement et puis sur laquelle on va vouloir consulter aussi. Laurent, j'ai-tu manqué quelque chose par rapport à ça?
Non, je crois que tu as dit l'essentiel. Ce sur quoi je vais insister encore, c'est sur les outils qu'on va développer, j'allais dire guidance in English, that we have to develop, because we know that competencies, mindset, character attributes, when we are in HR, it's kind of clear. But when you're not in HR, it becomes very confusing. So, on sait qu'on va devoir développer les définitions qui vont avec, des outils pour les mettre en place, des outils pour les évaluer, des outils pour accompagner les gestionnaires et les employés dans l'utilisation de ces compétences et de ces attributs de caractère, comme par exemple des parcours d'apprentissage. On n'a pas encore défini complètement la stratégie, mais ça fait partie des éléments qu'on regarde parce que oui, ça va demander beaucoup d'explications et je crois que ça va demander aussi, ce qui est une très bonne chose, dans les futurs processus de gestion du rendement et des talents, beaucoup de discussions entre le gestionnaire et son employé. Parce que un attribut de caractère, comme une compétence d'ailleurs, il faut s'assurer qu'on connaisse la compréhension que l'autre a de cette compétence ou de cet attribut. Si on ne fait pas ces discussions, ça ne pourra jamais fonctionner. Donc, on va aussi trouver des outils pour inciter les gens à avoir ces conversations, parce que ce sont des conversations essentielles.
Super, merci. Puis, contente d'avoir pu vous donner cette plateforme-ci aujourd'hui. Je pense que ça fait partie de vos discussions super importantes. On a deux questions qui sont un petit peu reliées. Have you considered flipping this model at the employee level instead so that we can prepare talent for leadership positions instead of waiting until the access management? It's because for some of us, it's like, oh, I'm stepping into a whole new realm and I'm completely unprepared. And these new norms are completely different from what I'm used to. And related to that, is the new profile going to kind of trickle down to the middle management, to the employee? Because realistically, if we're talking about culture change, cannot solely happen at the top.
Je l'ai mentionné très brièvement au début de la présentation. We did sort of put the emphasis, and this is part of the broader, what we call the Senior Leader Initiative, which is, of course, more geared toward executives. But absolutely, la réponse est oui. C'est un modèle qu'on développe avec en tête tous les niveaux de l'organisation. And so this is definitely something we would like to trickle down to not only the non-EX managerial levels, but the non-managerial levels overall in the organization, justement en préparation pour les postes de leadership. Laurent, vous voulez ajouter quelque chose?
Oui, je voulais ajouter quelque chose. Commencer par le bas, ce qui est contraire à ce qu'on fait d'habitude, en soi n'est pas une mauvaise idée. Sauf que dans le cas de ce modèle, je ne suis pas sûr que ça aurait pu fonctionner. Parce que montrer de l'empathie, si moi, en tant qu'employé ou en tant que gestionnaire, je monte dans l'empathie à mes employés en leur disant « je comprends que la charge de travail est énorme et on va repousser les échéances », il faut que ma direction en haut soit d'accord avec ça. Il faut que ma direction démontre aussi de l'empathie. Donc, si je commence à entrer par le bas, ça risque de pas fonctionner. L'essence de ce modèle, je dirais, c'est que ça doit commencer tout en haut par les sous-ministres.
So we expect to model the desired behaviors and then let that change just happen. Tracy, Sarah, any reactions to that?
I feel very heartened by this model, and I wonder how that will affect performance reviews. Will we continue to see performance reviews remain top-down, or may they shift to be bottom-up?
So there is just a very quick note on that. It's a very good question, and it's one that will need further exploring. If we in the deck that will be shared, you will see the SLS placemat, and in there we've got a capsule for performance and potential, or what we're calling performance and potential, and the review of that process throughout government. And so those are questions that we're currently asking ourselves. It's not necessarily our team, but that OCRO is currently asking themselves. And the whole assessment around, how we assess these things is a very good point, in the sense that let's take the empathy character attribute. Who's in a better position to evaluate empathy? Is it your employees or is it your supervisor? And so perhaps there is more of a 360 element to this. Just some things that we're considering and exploring for sure.
Excited to see what changes could come about. Yes, public service of the future. Be the change you want to see.
Don't start me on performance review because I will never finish. I've been responsible for this file for many years, and there are so many changes that I would like to do to performance reviews. The first thing being discussion, conversation that doesn't happen enough, which is the most important part. And yes, I think that it should go the other way around too. That as a manager, you would benefit from an evaluation from your peers and from your employees. But I'm not the one deciding, so I don't know what will happen tomorrow. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Noted. Thank you. Follow-up question. How will the work, why did you decide to use the Ivy character-based leadership model for your character traits? Any concerns with the model?
Laurent, je te laisse parler là-dessus, je pense que tu en connais un peu plus.
So we don't go with Ivy model. We did a lot of research around existing attributes model because there are several attributes model. And we had also behavior and attributes working group that met a few years ago. We talked about attribute and the importance to introduce it. But we came with a list of attributes that was, in fact, quite similar when you cross-reference. Whatever the model you choose, it's kind of the same attribute that you will find at the end of the day, maybe with different words. So we are not planning to go with IV character, but we know that it might be similar at the end, and we'll have the discussion that we need to have when it comes to this with of course the author of this model. But we are not planning specifically to go with IV with the IV model. I want to insist on this. Not at this point. It can change because we haven't make a final decision on this. But this is not the road that we are taking right now at this moment.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying. Sarah, I'm wondering if your research and your observation over the years is this in alignment with the trends that you've observed? And is this really the leadership of the future? Yes or no, and why, please?
Gosh, I don't know. I guess I continue to have concerns, as I did when I was ADM, about the performance management system, because it's a very individualistic system. It is based upon, for an organization that pretends to be evidence-based or would love to be evidence-based, it is based upon extrinsic rewards such as money and status and so on. And yet we know that that's actually not what motivates people. And in fact, it can actually have negative effects upon motivation. So there's a whole bunch of problems with the system that we have. I don't expect it to disappear anytime soon. I guess it's hard for me to answer that because am not, I think all of the discussions, in fact, I would say that these new competencies and so on are a move in the right direction. So I applaud that. However, and in some cases, you already have people that are behaving in that way and are managing in that way. It's too soon to tell whether the effect of a change will be to reach those who sometimes are very powerful that don't manage in that way. And that will be the test. And, it would be lovely to see, wouldn't it?
Like Tracy said, she's here to deliver a message of hope.
Yes, we can be hopeful.
Thank you all so very much for your time, for your patience, for your presence, and our questions are still trickling in. We are out of time. Donc, merci à tous et à toutes pour votre présence aujourd'hui avec nous. Stay tuned for our next event next month, and then we'll see you all later for follow-up discussion on this topic. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne fin d'après-midi. Stay safe.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.